There are a lot of questions about college football right now, and probably the biggest story in sports right now is that there have been a lot of positive tests coming at Clemson, and there are now up to 37 players at Clemson that have tested positive for the coronavirus. But there's a silver lining with all that. These aren't serious cases. We don't have any hospitalizations or ventilators. As these kids and great athletes who are very well conditioned, they're very healthy individuals, and 37 positive tests. And even though that may sound like a high number to you, there were zero hospitalizations. But what does all this mean for college football? Because no matter where you are, whether it's out west, the middle of America, down south, northeast, there is probably a college football program within driving distance of you, somewhere close to where you live, that has had a player test positive for the coronavirus. And you might not know who that player is. The school might not have released that information. They've probably kept all of the names in college football who have tested positive to themselves. We don't know if it's Trevor Lawrence, for example, or the backup or third string punter on Clemson, if any of those players in particular were the one of the 37 that tested positive. But it brings up the question about what will happen with college football this year. Joel Klatt from Fox Sports, who is their number one football commentator and does their number one game every week next to Gus Johnson. He's awesome. I think he does a really good job. He's one of my favorite college football analysts in America. And he tweeted out something this week that I've been giving a lot of thought to. He said, and this is directly from his Twitter, I could see a scenario where Power 5 programs only play other Power 5s this season. The Power 5 programs will have very similar testing protocols and procedures, while others may fall short of those standards. Now, I'm sure after he sent out that tweet, given his stature and prominent position, as he has almost 200,000 Twitter followers, that there was a big grunt of people from like the MAC, the Sun Belt, Conference USA, who probably were offended that Joel Klatt would say that their testing protocols won't be on the same level as the SEC and Big Ten. But one of the things that we have, I think, as sports talk show hosts realize, if they're really out there with your eyes wide open and thinking critically about what is going on right now during this pandemic, many of us should be saying that the changes you see right now to sports as we know them, the things that are getting altered or significantly modified or changed, and they're being done in the name of, hey, we got to do it. The season is so wacky and so different anyways, so we are going to jam through these significant rule changes or style changes, or just saying the game is not going to be the same, and we're doing it under the heading of it's a pandemic, so we'll do it. We'll deal with it. And I think that some of the temporary changes that get made are going to be more permanent ones and stick around. Like the designated hitter in the National League in Major League Baseball, I don't think that is just a one-year thing. You know, I don't think that is just a 60-game experiment. I think that is something we are going to see for years. And so any idea that gets put out there this year is going to be advertised as short-term, but I think could be permanent. I think Power 5 teams playing only Power 5 teams, and that's it. I want to tell you how I feel about that. And I think that this would be an opportunity for those 65 schools that make up the 5 Power 5 conferences, as well as Notre Dame, for them to just go off and do their own thing and only play each other, and have that become its own separate level of college football. College football at the absolute top, where they only play against each other. And that would be probably financially a big blow to the other schools. But those schools were propped up and held up and maybe financially breaking even because they were playing 1 or 2 games a year against the Power 5 schools. I know for me, what is my investment in the sport? Like, if you were to ask me as a college football fan, what is prototypically the best day of college football looking like for me? Like your prototypical dream Saturday. The answer is I just want to see the best games between the best teams and the most entertaining product. I want college football at the absolute top to be as competitive and as entertaining as it possibly can be. And so that's why, if my options are your team, your Power 5 team, whether it's in the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, Pac 12, or ACC, or Notre Dame, right? If you're any of those schools, I'm giving the option where all my games are against teams from major conferences. If that is something that is really on the table here, being talked about as a serious plan for college football going forward, it is something that I would absolutely want to see get done. Why do we accept that? Why would you want to invest time and energy and spend money into watching some of the David Goliath matchups that exist right now in college football? What's the point of those games? Why do we need those games? It's funny to me because I complain all the time about the NFL preseason and how boring it is and how the games and final score doesn't really matter unless you bet on the games. You don't care if your team wins or loses, as there is no correlation between your preseason record and regular season record. The New England Patriots went 0-4 in the 2007 preseason and then 16-0 in the regular season. The 2008 Detroit Lions went 4-0 in the preseason and 0-16 in the regular season. So there's no stock that's put into how you perform in the preseason as a team unit. Maybe individually it determines a couple jobs, but it doesn't have any bearings on what happens when the games really count. Now, the non-conference matchups where you're playing a cupcake, it does count for your actual record. But other than that, the games itself where we have these matchups between great teams playing against smaller Division I and FCS teams, and we're talking about like 40-point spreads and 50-point spreads, and I'll ask again, what is the point of having those games? The best product college football can put out there, if we're going to talk about expanding playoff or ways to enhance the college football product, how about doing away from matchups where the outcome is already predetermined? And I know you get some of those within a conference. I know that most years, almost all the time, a school like Alabama, when they play Vanderbilt, how that's going to turn out. Vanderbilt doesn't really have that much of a shot. A team like Kansas doesn't really have that much of a shot against Oklahoma, but at least they're part of the same league and at least they're part of the same conference. College football, when I see the tweet from Joel Klatt, one of the first things that came to mind was, if college football can use the health risks and the safety of student athletes to compel all the major conference commissioners and all the major Power 5 school athletic directors to come together and say, let's just do strictly a 12-game schedule that only consists of the Power 5 teams and Notre Dame. You have 65 teams in one league, and those are the only teams you're free to schedule your games against. Those are the only teams outside of your conference you're allowed to play your non-conference games against. When I saw that, I wanted to go look and check how many times a year exactly do some of these major conference teams play how many non-conference games do they play? Is it 3? Is it 4? How many waste of time games do we have on these schedules? How many games are these bye games, these cupcake games, where you're just paying a team to show up for about $1 million and be a sacrificial lamb and get the absolute crap beat out of them, and it's a guaranteed win, and it's a game where coaches can take a breather and teams can play their depth guys in the fourth quarter and second half of games? How many of those games are on the schedule for some of the best teams in America? That's what I was wondering. So I checked Alabama, for example, and they play Kent State, Georgia State, and Tennessee Martin, who isn't even in the FBS. That's a quarter of their schedule. 12-game regular season, and 1/4 of their schedule is against one-fourth of their schedule is against Kent State, Georgia State, and Tennessee Martin. What's the point? LSU, the defending national champions, play Texas San Antonio, Rice, and Nicholls State, who also isn't even in the FBS. Florida has South Alabama, New Mexico State, and Eastern Washington, who isn't even the FBS. all on the Gators schedule. Some of these schools are playing a quarter of their season against teams that they know if they show up 15 minutes late, they could beat them still by 5 or 6 touchdowns. Those three SEC schools that will all start the season in the top 10 will also start the year 3-0 automatically. Why wouldn't the Power 5 teams want to all come together and make their own league? They already make their own playoff. It's not the NCAA tournament. It's the college football playoff. Mark Emmert, who is the president of the NCAA, doesn't come out and give the trophy to the team that wins the college football playoff. He didn't congratulate Ed Orgeron. He's never congratulated Nick Saban or Dabo Swinney after they've won a national championship. The Bulls are totally different. They're not run by the NCAA. They're independent. So the entire college football postseason acts independently of the NCAA. The only thing the NCAA really does for major D1 college football is organize everything in terms of like the dates and stuff and punish teams and legislate the sport in that kind of way. Investigate teams, and that's really it. They're not putting on these games and they're not putting on the postseason. So in that way, if the Power 5 is already through the college football playoff, if they are already separated of the NCAA, if they're already independent, why wouldn't they do something like that? And why shouldn't they? If the Power 5 broke away from the rest of college football, who or what are the leagues and schools that would lose out on it? How many would really have a strong college football program? How many would get destroyed by that? It's like 4 or 5. And how many would really suffer? Like, how many popular top 25 teams would be excluded from that league? I mean, you have the list of UCF, BYU, Memphis, Boise State. There's a couple, but relatively speaking, there's not many. And you can make the argument, and here's the big key here, that they're already getting screwed the way things are formatted now, because if you are one of those schools and don't lose a game for the whole season, odds are you're not making the playoff anyway. Just ask UCF. In 2018 or 2017, they didn't lose a game and they weren't the national champions. I know they threw a little parade and like to say, like, self-declare themselves the national champion, but they weren't the national champions. They didn't win the college football playoff. They weren't even invited to the college football playoff. College football is the only sport where you could win every single game and not be declared the champion of your sport. So what is the difference? So if this is a chance right now, in these worst of times, if this is a chance for college football to improve its product in the name of safety and health, and to come up with a plan that makes things easier for this year, but also makes things more appealing and thinks about this. The whole idea of Alabama, let's just say playing UT Martin, is to get 80,000 people to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, inside of Bryant-Denny Stadium to make the university and the Tuscaloosa area money, to make the businesses there money, to make Alabama as a school money, to make Bryant-Denny Stadium money, stadium employees. It is the only reason they're having those games is to make everyone there money. That game, from a TV standpoint, sure, it's Alabama, so it sells to some extent, but that's not a made-for-TV kind of matchup that will draw good ratings nationally. And in this upcoming college football season, it is a made-for-TV season. I think you would want to eliminate these throwaway games. There's no point in having Ohio State play Bowling Green if there are no fans allowed there. There's no point of San Jose State flying across the country to play Penn State. There's no point in Oregon going to Hawaii to play a game. There's no point in Michigan hosting Arkansas State. We don't need these games. Replace them with games against other Power 5 schools, as it would probably also force a lot of these schools to bring back some of these old rivalries that we haven't seen in a while because of conference realignment. It would be a chance for some schools to bring back some of those games. Kansas can play Missouri again. You can bring back some of these old matchups. So if we are really living in an age where everything is under review and there's a lot of critical thinking that's going to be pull these sports off, but also enhance the fan experience because they need you to watch more than ever to make their money. How about breaking the Power 5 away from the rest of college football, those 60 or so schools breaking away from the 50 or 60 other schools that make up the FBS and have their own league and playing only against each other and not playing against any more FCS schools or MAC or Mountain West or Sunbelt schools. Just a very competitive 12-game schedule versus your conference and then maybe 3 or 4 other good games in there that are just not complete. Hey, it's a homecoming weekend, show up and watch us beat this small sacrificial lamb school to a pulp. And so I want to know what you guys think. What do you guys think is going to happen with college football? One recommendation out there is from Joel Klatt, who I really like, and he just says, let's make it Power 5 only, and let's put those 5 conferences plus Notre Dame, and let's have them brash off into its own subdivision of college football. I'd love to see that. Would you? I want to see college football get rid of these Oklahoma, Missouri State, and Clemson Citadel matchups. What is the point of having these games during a pandemic where no fans are there, so really no money could be made? All right, so that's going to do it. Great segment on that. Always love talking college football with you guys. And the great thing is that as we get closer to college football, as the season approaches, we will be talking more and more CFB on this show. So, yeah. That's it.